As farmers prepare to plant, experts warn to not jump the gun. Sarah with Nebraska Extension joining us now. Thanks for talking with us. What are some things producers need to be worried about this spring?
Yeah, definitely. And hearing that weather report, absolutely right. It's been very hot and it's been very dry coming out of this winter season. And so, yes, you do want to get out there and plant. And obviously, there's a lot of movement out in the fields right now as farmers are getting ready to go. But we want to make sure that we plant for the conditions available to us to give that seed a good start. And so we want to make sure that temperatures are consistently above 50 degrees Fahrenheit for soil temps, which, it looks pretty optimum at the moment. But we want that for several days. We also want enough moisture, which is going to be a little difficult as much of the state is in some level of drought out there. And so you want enough moisture not only for good seedling germination and emergence, but the activation of residual herbicides for good weed control as well.
There's been a lot of interest in cover crops over the last several years. What are some things to consider about spring termination?
Absolutely. And it does depend on the year as to how much cover crops go in and when. Last year we had a lot of hail damage, so we did see some fall planted cover crops go in. And then we saw quite a bit here in the spring go in too. So there's varying levels of biomass accumulation that's out there in these fields. So it really does depend on the producer's goals, what they use those cover crops for, and when they plan to terminate them based on their crop insurance needs, for example. There's certain guidelines which may require a producer to terminate a little bit earlier based on where they're at. And this does help with soil moisture conservation. So it's definitely a benefit for them. But anecdotally, you also might see some of this residue that's degrading get into the way of planting, so you might not get as nice of a stand if you do potentially plant a little earlier or terminate a little earlier.
Anything else you could consider when you're deciding that when to terminate?
Yes, and so there are some people that have done the early termination, and then there's a lot of interest in the last couple of years in planting green, is what we call it. Now, that means that they either terminate their cover crop at or following planting at some time after germination has occurred for that cash crop of corn or soybeans in this case. Now, the common concern that farmers are worried about are allelopathy from that cover crop. That's mostly with our small-seeded broadleaf weeds, and so that does help with weed control. We don't necessarily see that on the larger seeds like corn or soybeans. What you do see if your corn crop comes up yellow after planting green, it's probably more nitrogen tie-up from that cover crop. And so that's something that you might want to think about adding in a good starter fertilizer package if you do plant green. And another thing, based on how much biomass is there, you might have to think about when to use a residual herbicide to make sure that it gets to that soil layer, it gets activated. You might have to make sure that pivot is running to get that 1/2 to 3/4 inches of water to activate that residual herbicide for good weed control.
Lots of factors going into this as usual. Thank you so much, Sarah.
NTV's Grow promises to bring you all the news and trends surrounding agriculture in Nebraska.